He knelt before her grave every morning before the sun came up, whispering the same trembling words, "She's still alive." No one believed him. Not the gravediggers, not the townsfolk, not even the priest. But when a millionaire passed by and dared to ask why, what he unearthed shattered everything they thought they knew. You're watching Storytelling and Beyond, where every untold story finds its voice. The chill of dawn swept across the old cemetery on the outskirts of Milltown, where rows of time-worn headstones stood like silent sentinels guarding the forgotten. In the far corner, near the ancient oak tree that arched like a watchful guardian, knelt a boy, small, thin, barely 9 years old. His name was Jamie. His clothes were dusty, his sneakers torn, and his face bore a sadness far older than his years. Every morning, like a ritual etched into his soul, Jamie came to sit at a grave marked Helen Grace, beloved mother. 1988 to 2023 inch. The name was carved into the worn granite, neat but cold. Jamie would brush away the dead leaves, place a paper flower he folded himself, and then whisper, eyes locked on the name. "She's not dead. She's still alive. I can hear her." People watched from afar. They felt pity, sure. But no one really listened. Grief plays tricks on the young, they'd mutter. Poor lad's lost his mind. Just let him be. But Jamie wasn't imagining things. Not in his heart. He remembered the night clearly, the shouting, the stranger in black, his mother's terrified eyes as she shoved him into the closet and locked it tight. He had stayed hidden for hours until someone found him the next day, wide-eyed and trembling. They told him his mother had died. They showed him a closed casket. They buried her. But no one let him see her. No one explained. "She's not dead," he whispered again that morning. "I heard her. I still do." He didn't know that his quiet pleas were echoing beyond the graveyard. Across town, a man named Marcus Harlan had just returned to Milltown. A multi-millionaire who once swept streets here as a teen, Marcus made his fortune in solar energy. He was successful, powerful, but broken in ways money couldn't heal. His wife had died suddenly 5 years ago. His only daughter, Bella, was now 8 and battling a rare illness that had made him question everything. Marcus had always believed in signs. That morning, as he drove past the cemetery, his driver slowed at the corner where they saw Jamie kneeling. Something about the boy's posture, the weight of sorrow slumped on such small shoulders, tugged at Marcus's heart. "Stop the car," he said abruptly. The driver hesitated. "Sir?" "I said stop." Marcus stepped out into the mist, buttoning his coat. He walked quietly, his leather shoes crunching softly over gravel. Jamie didn't turn around. He was too deep in his ritual, whispering to the stone, folding another little paper flower, pressing it to the base. Marcus waited, then gently asked, "Is that your mother?" Jamie finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, not from tears but from endless hope that refused to die. "She's not gone. I don't care what they say. I hear her. In dreams. Sometimes, in the wind." Marcus crouched beside him. "What's her name?" "Helen. Helen Grace. She used to sing to me. At night. I still hear it." The millionaire didn't laugh. He didn't scoff or dismiss the boy like so many others had. Instead, he said quietly, "Sometimes, when we love someone deeply, part of them stays. Even when the world says they're gone." Jamie shook his head. "But she's not. I heard her say my name. After they buried her." That stopped Marcus cold. "What do you mean, after they buried her?" Jamie's voice dropped to a whisper. "The night after the funeral. I slept right here. It was cold, but I didn't want to go. I heard it clear as day." "Jamie." "It came from under the ground." Marcus stared at the headstone, his heart heavy and confused. Was this grief? Was it trauma? Or something more? Something about the boy's unwavering belief haunted him. He'd seen lies. He'd faced manipulation. But this was raw, innocent conviction. What if there was a truth no one dared to consider? He didn't know it then, but that one question, that one pause, would change everything. As Marcus stood to leave, Jamie tugged at his coat. "Please, mister. You have lots of money, right? Can you help dig?" Marcus didn't answer. Not then. But his mind was already racing. Something wasn't right. And if Jamie's mother really wasn't in that grave, what had they buried instead? The wind stirred again. The oak tree groaned. And a story buried deep beneath lies was about to claw its way into the light. Marcus Harlan hadn't planned to return to that cemetery so soon. But the boy's words, "Can you help dig?" echoed louder than his own thoughts all night. That wasn't just a plea from a grieving child. It felt like something more. Something unresolved. Something urgent. By the next morning, Marcus was standing at the town archives, leafing through brittle pages of burial permits, death certificates, and coroner reports. He had power, influence, and a last name that could open doors others never knew existed. But even with all his clout, what he found or didn't find made the hairs on his neck stand. There was no official autopsy for Helen Grace. No confirmed time of death. No photo identification by family. Only a line written in rushed ink, "Died in domestic incident." Witness, Officer Troy K. Marcus frowned. "Who's Officer Troy K.?" The clerk raised a brow. "Transferred months ago. Left the force abruptly." That was the first red flag. Later that day, Marcus visited the funeral home listed on the burial record. A tired-looking mortician squinted at the old ledger, then blinked. "That one, we didn't embalm her." "Unusual, yes. Body came in sealed. We were told not to open it." "By whom?" The mortician scratched his balding head. "Some police directive. Said the case was sensitive." Marcus left in silence, his chest tight. It made no sense. He had sat through hundreds of reports in boardrooms, heard every excuse from dishonest partners and investors. But this? This wasn't just red tape. It smelled like a cover-up. That evening, he drove back to the cemetery. Jamie was already there, as if time itself revolved around his tiny world of grief and hope. He was humming quietly, tenderly, a lullaby only children remember. The one his mother used to sing. Marcus waited until the boy was done. "Jamie, did your mom ever hurt anyone? Did she have enemies?" Jamie shook his head fiercely. "No. She was nice. She worked at the library. She used to let me pick any book I wanted. She always said stories make people brave." "Do you remember the night she disappeared?" Jamie looked down, his voice small. "I remember her screaming. A man came in. She pushed me into the closet. Told me to count to 100 and not make a sound. I counted to 200. Then, quiet. Then someone opened the closet and took me away. They said she died. That she hit her head. But you didn't see her?" Marcus pressed. No, Jamie's lip trembled. "I never got to say goodbye." Marcus nodded solemnly. It was the same night the town claimed she had died. And yet, nothing lined up. He made a decision that very night, one he knew would bring media storms, outrage, maybe even legal trouble. But he couldn't ignore the chill that wrapped around his spine. What if the boy was right? He called a private investigator. A trusted friend who had helped him untangle some of his company's worst corruption cases. "I need everything on a woman named Helen Grace. And a cop named Troy K. Start with domestic calls, emergency dispatch records, and anything suspicious on file. Do it discreetly." In the meantime, Marcus did what few would dare. He submitted a formal request to the town council to exhume the grave of Helen Grace. They scoffed. "Based on a child's dream?" But Marcus didn't blink. "Based on gaps in your records, an illegal police directive, and a lack of autopsy." After 2 days of heated legal wrangling, the permit was signed. Jamie stood beside Marcus on the cold morning the grave was opened. A small crowd had gathered. Some were curious, others disapproving. A few held their breaths. The casket rose slowly. The workers looked uneasy. One murmured, "I don't like this." Marcus motioned to the medical examiner on standby. The box was unsealed. And then, gasps. It wasn't a decomposed body. It wasn't even a woman. Inside was a stuffed dummy covered in blankets, weighted with sandbags. One of the gravediggers stumbled backward. "What the hell is this?" Jamie clutched Marcus's hand, wide-eyed but not surprised. "I told you. She's not in there." Marcus stared into the empty lie. "Then where is she?" He didn't know that in the shadows of a forgotten building just a few miles away, behind concrete walls and locked doors, Helen Grace was alive, barely being held by men who feared what she knew. And now that someone had dared to dig, her silence wouldn't last much longer. Marcus Harlan had uncovered many lies in his life: corrupt business partners, backroom deals, fraudulent contracts, but never a fake funeral. He stood in stunned silence beside Jamie as the empty coffin was gently lowered back into the ground. There were whispers, gasps, and murmurs of confusion all around them. But Marcus's thoughts were focused like a laser. If Helen wasn't buried, where was she? And why fake her death at all? Back in his black SUV, Marcus pulled out his phone. His private investigator, Gavin Knox, had already left 3 missed calls. When Marcus finally answered, Gavin didn't bother with pleasantries. "You were right. The officer listed on the report, Troy Kennison, was removed from the force after internal review. He was never charged, but there's a sealed document about a domestic violence case tied to Helen Grace." Marcus clenched the steering wheel. "That's not all," Gavin continued. "Jamie's biological father, Ethan Cole, was arrested for assaulting Helen 4 years ago. Released on bail. Vanished. But guess what? His brother runs an unlicensed private rehab center on the outskirts of town." Marcus's voice turned ice cold. "You think she's being held there?" Wood explained the cover-up. "No paper trail, no official body, no medical report. I want you to meet me there. We're going tonight." The facility sat in the woods, cloaked by pine and silence. There was no sign, just a gravel path leading to a rust-streaked gate. Marcus and Gavin parked far enough away to avoid suspicion. They moved in under the cover of dusk, dressed like 2 men who didn't care about breaking rules, because tonight, rules didn't matter. The makeshift rehabilitation center sat like a decaying skeleton in the woods, half abandoned, eerily quiet, and far removed from the whispers of law and compassion. It wasn't a place for healing. It was a place where people were sent to be forgotten. Marcus and Gavin crouched behind the overgrown hedges just as 2 men stepped out the front door. They wore no uniforms, just heavy boots and suspicion in their eyes. One lit a cigarette. The other locked the door behind them. "That's our window," Gavin whispered. They made their move, cutting across the side of the building and slipping in through a busted basement window. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and hopelessness. Fluorescent lights flickered weakly overhead. Marcus felt every step in his chest, his heart thudding like a war drum. They moved down the narrow corridor until a frail voice pierced the silence. "Jamie?" Both men froze. Marcus turned to Gavin with wide eyes. "Which room?" he whispered. The voice came again, this time barely audible. They pushed open a rusted door, revealing a dim, windowless room lined with thin mattresses. And there she was, Helen Grace, alive, thin, bruised, but unmistakably her. Her auburn hair was now streaked with gray, her eyes sunken but burning with recognition when she saw Marcus. "You," she whispered. "You're the man Jamie met at the cemetery." Marcus fell to his knees, stunned. He was right. "You're alive." She nodded weakly, tears spilling. "They told me I was going to die here. They said Jamie was too young to remember. That it was better this way." Gavin already had his phone out, dialing emergency services. Marcus removed his coat and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. He had never felt rage like this, not in boardrooms, not in courtrooms, but now it boiled inside him like a storm. "Don't speak. We're getting you out of here." Within 20 minutes, sirens lit up the trees outside. Police swarmed the building, arresting the men at the front. Paramedics carried Helen out on a stretcher as Jamie's name trembled on her lips over and over again. 2 days later, at Seattle General Hospital, Jamie sat quietly in a chair beside his mother's bed. He didn't cry this time. He just held her hand like it was made of light. "You knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, gripping her fingers tighter. "I never felt like you were gone." Marcus stood at the doorway, watching the scene unfold. The boy who had cried at a grave now sat beside the woman he loved more than life, and he had never been wrong. When Helen recovered enough to speak at the press conference a week later, the city listened. "I faked my death because I was told it was the only way to survive. But it was my son's hope and a stranger's kindness that brought me back." That stranger, Marcus Harlan, had already made arrangements for Helen and Jamie to live in one of his private properties until they could start a new life. But the biggest gift was something neither of them could quantify: freedom. As Jamie ran through the front yard of their new home weeks later, Helen smiled from the porch, stronger now, alive in every way. Marcus sat beside her with a warm coffee in hand. "I never thought you'd actually dig up a grave," she said with a chuckle. Marcus smiled. "I never thought I'd be taught a lesson in faith by a little boy with tear-stained cheeks and a heart bigger than my bank account." They sat in silence, watching Jamie chase butterflies in the golden afternoon light, because sometimes, the dead don't stay buried, especially when love refuses to let go. This was Storytelling and Beyond, where every tear, every turn, and every triumph is part of a story worth telling.